Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're kind of pulling back the curtain on how new cancer drugs get approved. And here's the thing that might surprise you. Often, it's not really based on whether they help people live longer or even live better. Instead, it's based on these things called surrogate endpoints. Think quicker measures like does a tumor shrink on a scan?
Yeah, and what's really fascinating, or maybe concerning, is this tension, right? On one hand, you absolutely want to get promising new therapies out to patients, to you, as fast as possible. Hope is critical, but on the other hand, you need to be sure these therapies actually deliver, a longer life, a better quality of life. So we're going to explore sort of the pitfalls of the current approach and maybe think about a better path forward.
Okay, yeah, let's dive into that. So when we talk drug approval, there are these different measures. You have clinical endpoints, that's stuff that really matters to patients, right? Like overall survival, OS, just living longer. And quality of life, QOL, actually feeling better during that time.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the gold standards.
But then there are these surrogate endpoints like progression-free survival, PFS. These are quicker to measure, maybe based on scans showing tumor changes. So the big question is, how reliable are these surrogates, these shortcuts?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And frankly, the data is a bit sobering. There was a big review, and it found that only about 23% of these surrogate measures actually showed a strong link to overall survival.
Wow, only 23%. That seems really low.
It is low. It means, yeah, it's for the vast majority, a good result on the surrogate doesn't reliably tell you if the patient will live longer because of the drug. And if we look closer at PFS, for instance, well, first, how you define progression on a scan can be pretty arbitrary. And maybe even more importantly, PFS often just doesn't track with quality of life.
Wait, hang on. So you're saying a drug could make a scan look better, shrink the tumor, but the patient might actually feel worse on the treatment?
That absolutely happens. We see situations where treatments improve PFS, but come with side effects that significantly worsen a patient's day-to-day quality of life. It creates this unsettling paradox you mentioned.
That is unsettling. And you also mentioned biases. How do they play in?
Right. There are potential biases too, like something called informative censoring.
Mm.
This is where, say, patients who are getting sicker and drop out of the trial might be removed from the final analysis in certain ways. And that can inadvertently make the drug look better than it is because you're mostly looking at the outcomes for people who could tolerate it.
So the people who stuck with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The core issue here is that getting that quick approval based on a scan, it often doesn't guarantee what matters most, a longer, better life.
Okay.
It's a really important point to grasp.
Okay, this feels incredibly important for patients navigating treatment options. So what really stands out to you about how this whole situation impacts, the actual drug approvals and the development process?
Well, there's definitely a trend, and it's a bit concerning. Regulators seem to be increasingly granting full, regular approval based on these sometimes weaker surrogates, not just accelerated approval, but the final nod.
And why is that distinction so critical?
Because the data afterwards isn't always reassuring. Studies have shown something like 86% of drugs approved this way, based only on surrogates for regular approval. Well, years later, they still haven't shown a clear overall survival benefit.
86%, that's huge.
It is. And you have to understand the pressures involved. There's huge pressure for speed from patients, understandably, desperate for new options, and let's be frank, from the pharmaceutical industry too. Faster market access is, financially significant.
Right, that incentivizes focusing on the quicker endpoint, the surrogate.
Precisely. And another piece of this puzzle is patient understanding. People often hear progression-free survival is better and naturally assume that means they'll live longer. Even when doctors try to explain the nuance, that connection is easily made in a patient's mind.
Okay, so given all these challenges, the weak correlations, the approval trends, the misunderstandings, how do we actually chart a better course? What needs to change?
It really comes down to a few key things, I think. First, we need a much more rigorous validation of these surrogates before they're widely accepted for full approval. We need to know they reliably predict OS, and transparency is key. We need clarity on the strength or weakness of the link.
Makes sense. What about trial design?
Yeah, the FDA is actually looking at things like a one-trial approach. The idea is to design a single trial that looks at both the surrogate endpoint for a quick read and follows patients long enough to get the definitive overall survival data. That can be more efficient. And crucially, we have to measure quality of life directly and robustly in these trials, not just guess it based on side effects, but ask patients how they're actually feeling and functioning.
So QOL is a primary goal, not an afterthought.
Exactly. And maybe the thinking needs to shift. Perhaps surrogates should primarily be used for accelerated approval, the conditional faster pathway. But that approval absolutely must come with a strict requirement for follow-up confirmatory trials designed to prove that real clinical benefit, the OS and QOL.
This deep dive really underscores the complexity, doesn't it? It's this constant balancing act between wanting innovation quickly and needing certainty about the benefit.
Absolutely. It really challenges all of us, I think, to look critically at drug approvals and always ask that fundamental question. Is this truly benefiting the patient in the ways that matter most to them? So maybe the next time you hear about a breakthrough cancer drug, pause and consider. Is the benefit being touted a longer, better life? Or is it merely an improvement seen on a scan? It leaves you thinking, doesn't it? What really stands out to you about striking that right balance between speed and certainty and bringing new medicines forward?